Thank you, and hello. It's great to see so much excitement and happiness and pride looking out at the audience. President Aoun, esteemed faculty and staff, members of the Board of Trustees, thank you for inviting me here today. Family and friends, welcome. And for the real business at hand, congratulations to the Northeastern class of 2023. You did it. I'm so honored to be with you here today and to share a few stories that I hope will bring some of the lessons others have been talking about on this podium to life. I've been reflecting on your experience, and I'd like to underscore an important detail that marks this class as unique. You're a class who has collectively had to adapt to the unexpected. As Clara mentioned, what you thought was going to happen at college and what actually did happen was completely upended by the global pandemic. And we can all agree that each of you has learned a lesson that takes many people years of their post-college lives to learn. I received a really good piece of advice once that while you can't control the shocks that happen, you can control how you react to them. When I was graduating from business school in 1998, I started a company called Eve.com, the very first company that sold cosmetics online. We had to work to convince prestigious brands that the internet was not a shady place and they should sell products online. And it turned out that women flocked to place orders on our site. Our first year sales alone were $10 million. I know. It was crazy. 2 years after founding, in April 2000, I sold this business, and I stayed on to work for the acquirer. But soon after the sale, the entire .com industry collapsed. Eve's acquirer had financial issues of their own, and they had to shut us down. And at that point, everyone was proclaiming, the internet is over, it's dead. It was discouraging to see the industry that I had focused on apparently melt down. That's when I received the advice. I was hosted for lunch by a guy named Mike McCaffrey, who was the founder and CEO of a renowned investment bank. And he said to a group of us, now that you've gone through this, the tendency will be for you all to be risk-averse. Sort of like the survivors of the Great Depression of the 1930s, who famously could never spend money again after that. Of course, nothing is as it seems. The internet was not over. It was not the death of the internet, it was the birth of the internet. And he was right, Mike was right. The tendency, facing a negative surprise, is to become more worried, more cautious, to listen to doubting voices, to begin lowering expectations and compromising dreams. I'd like to ask you to wipe the slate clean and consider how not to allow the trauma of the pandemic, or for that matter, what appear to be the problems of today's world, make you less optimistic. Instead, consider this question while I'm speaking to you today, well put by the poet Mary Oliver. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Whether it's about who you spend time with or what you do with that time, how will you spend your one precious life? What constraints might you put on yourself? What doubts are you facing? There is a way for you to achieve success while finding fundamental happiness with what you're doing. In fact, what if we were to redefine success as finding satisfaction and happiness? Who wouldn't want this? But there are road bumps that can knock you off path, off-ramps you'll be tempted to take because they look safer, especially when the going is tough. I'd like to shine a light on these through a few stories of my own. The first story is about the importance of the story you tell yourself. I grew up in the Middle East and Africa because of my dad's job as a development economist. The beginning of my life was idyllic. My happiest time was as a child in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where we lived in an apartment by the Indian Ocean in the 1970s. We had a record player, and my parents would play ABBA. There was no television, no air conditioning, and not much to shop for. And most days, it was too hot to wear clothes, so as a 7-year-old, I would run around only in my underwear. It was a simple life, and it was perfect. Flash forward a few years to 1980, and much had changed. After Tanzania, we moved to Iran, my dad's native country. The revolution happened while we were there. My sister and I were caught up in a mob of angry protesters on the way to school. And eventually, school closed, and we ended up living under martial law. So we immigrated to the US. And while I had enjoyed great privilege in Iran, here in the US at school, I faced daily hatred and discrimination for being half Iranian. And worst of all, my family was in serious financial trouble. My dad could not get a job as an Iranian immigrant. By day, I was miserable at school, and by night, I was panicked, overhearing my parents through the walls talking about how we were almost out of money. At that time, I remember that our living room had exactly one thing in it, resting on the floor, a clock radio. I would camp out on the wooden floor and listen to it. And in moments of escapism, I would imagine great scenes of my future set to the music. I was 10, and I wondered what I could do. What did I have? I could have told myself that I was helpless, that I had nothing, but I knew that I had one good asset that I had control over, and that was my brain. And I made the decision that I would use this brain to get out of the financial and social situation I was in. And I told myself this story: I am going to remake myself. My vision was to shape myself and my life into what I wanted. I worked hard and took every opportunity that was put in front of me. And I got into the habit of breaking myself down and building myself back up into something new quite frequently. And eventually, as I grew up, this vision turned into a purpose. I am always going to remake myself, meaning I would be a lifelong learner, ready for personal change. Of course, nothing is as it seems. If the revolution hadn't happened, and if I hadn't been forced to come to the US, I would likely not have had access to the tools, people, and capital I needed to start businesses. My personal narrative really helped when the world changed again. When I graduated from Williams, the internet didn't exist as far as we knew. And then 2 years later, on April 30th, 1993, the European Organization for Nuclear Research put the World Wide Web into the public domain, changing every single field that my classmates and I had entered, from teaching to medicine to business. When early internet companies like AOL, Yahoo, and Amazon emerged, I was excited. I was willing to take a leap and try a new field that I had no experience in. I visualized a story of success, that despite not having an education in computer science, I would figure out how to create a great internet company. I changed myself into a technology entrepreneur. This story of reinvention continues to help me. I've had dark moments. For example, my second company, Minted, almost completely failed upon launch. At these types of moments, I've thought about that little girl 42 years ago, daydreaming to the clock radio and facing terrible odds. And I say to myself, I wouldn't want to give up on her. I compare today to how bleak things looked when I arrived in the US, and it's hard to believe that this is part of the same life. The way I've looked at the situation, framed things, through the possibility of positive evolution and change, has made all the difference. I'd like to invite you to pause here and think of a moment in your childhood when you first had a dream or ambition for yourself. When you thought, this is what I want for myself. Take this moment now. How old were you? What were you dreaming of? What might have been the story you were telling yourself? Now take this image, this story, and carry it with you as you forge ahead. And when you hit a rough patch, imagine this child. How could you help them realize their dream? achieve their story. My second story is about how the softer skills, empathy and love, can light the way. Love for your work is important. When I graduated from college, I joined an investment bank. I could have stayed and enjoyed a very certain and very lucrative path, but I did not enjoy finance, and I could see that I would never excel like those who really loved it. Exposed to an entrepreneurial culture in the San Francisco Bay Area, what truly excited me was the idea of creating a product that lots of people would love and use. I went back to business school, and I was the only person from my class to start a company instead of taking a job. When people compared what they were doing at graduation parties, I was the only one who couldn't rattle off the name of an interesting company they were joining. I had to wrestle back fear and self-doubt and reframe this decision as a point of pride. I had to constantly tell myself, don't care what other people think of you. This was the early days of e-commerce. At this point, only books and software were being sold through the internet. My co-founder and I thought we could see around the corner, that one day maybe all categories of goods would be sold online. We were excited about providing convenience to buyers of cosmetics across the country. And though we were a bit uncertain about this, our passion for our business helped show us the way. And because of that passion, we didn't mind thinking about Eve.com nights and weekends. It didn't seem like work at all. Our hobby was our work, and our work was our hobby. We moved the fastest in a highly competitive landscape and ended up being the market leader, which resulted in our successful sale. In 2007, expecting my second child, I spotted what I thought was another shift in consumer behavior. People seemed to be turning away from big brands and towards this uniqueness of small makers. I never dreamed that I would have the luxury of getting to pursue something related to the arts or design for a living. Usually people don't associate the arts with business. But providing access to independent designers was what I was excited about. I had watched with love and empathy the Chinese side of my family, in particular my aunt and uncle, artists who had faced major challenges in getting their work to collectors and buyers. They would ask me for advice at Thanksgiving and other family gatherings because I'm the only business person in my family. I felt their struggle, and this lit a path for me. I had this instinct that there was possibly a world of incredible creative independents who, for reasons that had nothing to do with art, couldn't get distribution, and that I could bring their creations to market. And so I founded Minted. As I hand-built our community of artists, I would go meet with them across the country, face-to-face, in small towns all over the US. I would listen to their effort to support themselves with a day job that they didn't like. I would viscerally feel their courage at putting their creative vision out there naked for other people to criticize. I would listen to them when they divorced, when they fell ill, or experienced mental health issues. I developed the empathy to encourage them when they were worried their work was inadequate, and congratulate them when they married, had children, and experienced great professional success. And my team joined me in this, so I became we. And because we were filled with love for our artists, the greatest group of people I've ever had the pleasure of working with, the artists loved us back. We shaped products with their input that delighted customers. They were loyal to us above competitors and alerted us to threats. They stuck with us when we wanted to try new things, and they worked to recruit more artists into the community. So I think empathy is a key ingredient, almost a wayfinder to success. And in the process of following my own passion, guess what? I enabled others to pursue theirs. Minted's mission became to provide creators with the freedom to pursue their love of design while making a living. Our wedding invitations, holiday cards, and art have reached 40 million US homes. But the thing I'm proudest of is bringing the dignity of great work to our community of 20,000 independent artists in 100 countries around the world, from Australia to Kenya, from the Philippines to Israel. All of this success grew from a much softer skill set than I had imagined would make my career. Passion for the product I was making, love for the artists I knew, and empathy for the life that others lead. Which brings me to my third story. And this is a story about turkeys. You're going to experience not just self-doubt, but doubt from others throughout your life. When my co-founder Varsha and I worked to launch Eve.com, we faced skeptics every single day, from morning until night. Experienced people said, don't customers have to try cosmetics on in order to buy them? And a few even said, women don't buy things online. No one even thought shoes would sell online either. It seems absurd in retrospect, but back then in 1998, it was actually plausible feedback. Because Varsha and I were so early to this market, we had to face the headwinds of doubt and discouragement, even from people who had our best interests in mind. Sometimes along the way, I faced disbelievers not in the business idea, but in me. After I raised capital for Minted, I was asked to come in and give an update to the all-male venture capital firm, the partnership that had made the investment. I was in the middle of the presentation when one of the partners interrupted me and said, "Say that again, but say it like a CEO would." At this point, I was 38 years old and had sold my first company very successfully, so it was a bit of a baffling comment. After all, I was the CEO. If you were in his shoes, take a moment, think about how you would have handled it. You can DM me afterwards, actually. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm not going to say out loud what I actually felt like telling him, but I had conviction that Minted would succeed. And I felt that this gentleman didn't actually understand e-commerce as well as I did. I actually felt a bit embarrassed for him. So I decided to completely ignore the comment rather than give it any weight, and afterwards explained to the other partners at the firm that I would not be meeting with him again. Nothing is as it seems. Minted looked young and unsteady, but grew later to a profitable several $100 million a year business. Each of you will encounter people who prefer a safer path, find change uncomfortable, or believe there is one right way of doing things. Their beliefs will range from passive to active, and the discouragement may be of your ideas. You'll find discouragement masquerading as good dogma, such as, this is the right way to do things. This is too much, too fast. We will never get support for this. But success is not defined by what other people think. There is great value to independent thinking, to coming to your own conclusions and standing up for what you believe in. I want to share a brilliant, important image that I have thought of often while facing doubt and discouragement during my life, and I'll put it up here on the screen so you can see it. This is a cartoon by humorist Sandra Boynton that says, "Don't let the turkeys get you down." You see, there are all these turkeys standing on top of an elephant. And my advice to you is, do not be this elephant. In order to avoid his fate or her fate, you must learn to recognize the turkeys. You'll sometimes be surprised by who the turkeys are. There are some very powerful people in the world who are turkeys. These are not your garden variety turkeys, and they can be very smart. Don't let these naysayers discourage you from pursuing your beliefs and your passion. You are powerful, and no matter how powerful or smart they seem, they are just flightless birds. They are just turkeys. Now, speaking of turkeys, the reason I was drawn to entrepreneurship was because I didn't love, in the early 1990s, the working climate for women in business. I've never publicly told anyone this before, but at my group at the investment bank where I worked, things were rough. For example, the only team outings organized were to strip clubs. There were 2 undergraduates in the group, a guy 1 class ahead of me and me. And he would always join the older men at the clubs. And everyone seemed to think this entire situation was perfectly normal. As the youngest person in the group, it was difficult to forge critical mentorship relationships in this environment. So I left the more traditional work environments behind, and I created my own companies where I could shape a culture in which women could lead and where gender would not define opportunity. I've often felt that by doing this, I created a world that I wanted to live in. The vision of remaking extended from myself into the environment around me that others could participate in. I believed I had to go outside established institutions in order to thrive. The idea of trying to drive change within institutions was too daunting to me, and I didn't think that enough of my peers were ready to get engaged. Some people tend to criticize Gen Z for being impatient for change and insistent on equity, for having drawn too firm a line. But as a battle-scarred veteran of Gen X, I look at you all and I feel nothing but respect and pride. You've already proven that you're not afraid of taking institutions head-on from the inside and demanding that they change to enable you to thrive. Whatever your issue is, whatever your cause is, whether it is challenging world leaders to take immediate action on climate change, to pressing for equality for the LGBTQ+ community, to demanding stricter gun control laws, you are not accepting the status quo. And I wanted to say to you today, I think you're right. You're right to keep pressing, courageous to keep insisting on how you want to live your one wild and precious life. Every step you take is making the world a better place. And honestly, you're making the world a better place for all generations, including mine. I feel so optimistic about the future because the future is in your hands. As with my life, yours will surprise and even shock you. But remember, nothing is as it seems. Through your education at Northeastern, the most important thing you've learned is how to learn. Adapting to a fast-changing world is what a Northeastern education is all about. Your real-world experience is an integral part of your education. And this approach has prepared each of you, perhaps better than many of your peers around the world, for the future that you will experience and shape throughout your lives. Commencement is not the end of your learning experience, it's a continuation of it. My wish for you is that you find the persistence to follow what you love in the face of self-doubt and pressure. That you tell yourself a positive story when the going is tough. And that you persist in the face of conventional thinking. Just remember, Don't let the turkeys get you down. Congratulations again on your accomplishments and on your upcoming wild and precious life.